Welcome to Sadie Says. I'm Natalie Sady, and joining me today is poet, author, feminist, Yana Robinson. Did I pronounce it correctly?
You did. You nailed it.
Because the spelling is a little confusing.
Mm-hmm.
I had to search high and low to find the pronunciation, so that was a little bit scary. Welcome back to America. You've been in Greece.
Mm-hmm.
You are coming here straight off a flight.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very impressed. Now, I wanted to talk to you. I've been following your Instagram for, I think, about 2 years now. And a girlfriend and I have been obsessed with it because it is so honest. And I feel that your poetry often mimics the conversations that we have. Everything is so raw and it's real. Have you always been able to write in such a way that it is so honest?
So I think that for the most part, I think for about 4.5 years, I've really touched that honest and raw part of my voice. But when I first started, no. When I first started writing, it was more light and sweet. And I remember writing like beautiful prose essays when I was 19 in Australia. And then I really touched the nerve and my why, which is to share slabs of my heart with this world for a living. I think when probably 4 years ago, and I had an abortion, and the day after I was laying in bed and this huge piece just poured from me, and it was so honest it scared me.
So I read that poem last night, and I hadn't read it before, and I read it and I loved how honest it was, but I also recognized that to write something so raw about a topic that is so, the debate around it is so heated and so passionate, and both sides feel so strongly on their sides that they're very rarely able to move closer to the centre and find sort of some common ground. What was the pushback like when you wrote that?
So I definitely got everything, and I really checked in before I shared it of, have I processed this? That's a big part about vulnerability, is that I call it vulnerability prostituting. It's like if we're just giving our vulnerability for attention or recognition, and it's not a clean thing, it can really hurt us when we get things back. But I sat for a long time in that and felt pretty grounded in it. But the responses were, we always manifest exactly what we're the most afraid of. And the first guy I slept with, one of my first boyfriends, called me a murderer. And I also got called Woman of the Year. And I got also 300 comments and messages from different women. And one of them said, I was 14 and my mother dropped me off at the clinic and told me not to tell anyone, including her father dropped her off and said, don't tell anyone, including your mother. And she wrote me and said, you're the first person that I'm telling.
I'm literally covered in goosebumps.
Yeah,
that's horrible.
And I remember getting that and just going, oh, honesty is what gives us freedom, that we're not alone. And we need to be able to, so it was that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna share slabs of my heart, because that's what heals the suffering of this world, is remembering that we're not isolated in the experiences that could be dubbed as shameful.
Well, so, there are so many things there. So first of all, I think, just to touch on the abortion debate for a minute, whenever I see the whole issue being debated, it's always about these women are selfish, it's about their bodies, themselves, all of this. I say thankfully that I haven't had to make that choice. I haven't had to go through it. I have, however, had so many friends that have been through it, and I have talked to them before they make their decision, during the decision-making process, and then afterwards. And the people that seem to be anti-abortion seem to think that women just don't care. And the thing that your poem showed is the anguish that you went through in making that decision. It wasn't something where you went, I'll just pop down the road and I'll do this. And that's what I thought was so important in all of this. It essentially showed the process and the almost sort of torture of our soul to make such a decision. And it is a big decision that I have never met a woman that's taken it lightly. So first of all, thank you for sharing that. The other thing is, in a world, I think, where social media has become very superficial. Everybody is sharing the best part of their lives. And I think it's an amazing thing that we have this ability to share information and stories, and we're now talking about topics that we maybe wouldn't have talked about before because there wasn't an outlet for it. But with that has come this level of, I have to portray the perfect life and I'm living the best life that you could possibly imagine. And then we get people that come in like yourself that are just, this is what it is, for better or worse, hate me, love me, do whatever. And there is all of that. So you've talked about the abortion and your experiences with it. You've also shared about a great love in your life, Daniel, who committed suicide at some point. I don't know how long ago it was, but you
About 3 years ago.
You talk very passionately about it and him, and that in itself must open you up to everyone having an opinion.
Definitely. Yeah. With Daniel in particular, it was hard because people were grieving, and a lot of people in his life met me through the funeral and weren't acquainted with what I said, with like who I was in his life. And people can greatly misunderstand great honesty as a lot of things. So I faced probably some of the most challenging times of my life in writing about Daniel's death immediately after. There was a couple people and family members who said I was capitalizing off of my grief with him, and I was actually asked to remove all of my articles from Elephant Journal and my social media, and I obliged, and it's one of the things I actually regret the most.
Okay, so you did take it all down.
I did. I was deep in grief and sadness, and I'm a very sincere person, and I genuinely questioned when things are brought up for me. I bring them in and I go, okay, is this true? And it wasn't, but it was raw. And I wanted to love and hold space for people that weren't ready for that rawness. I'm going to publish all of those poems in a book called Conversations with Grief. They are going to live somewhere. Yeah.
And grief it's such a personal thing. And I think especially when suicide is involved, I think there are people that view it with shame. And it shouldn't be. I mean, it's somebody was struggling so much that they needed a solution, and it's heartbreaking that that is the solution they came to. But if we don't talk about it, how do we ever deal with it or help somebody else get through it? And because you've written about Daniel just recently.
Yeah.
I think there were 3 posts.
Yeah, so I had an Eat, Pray, Love experience in Crete, and I was working with a healer there doing some cranial sacral on my sacrum, and he released something somatically in my body that I wasn't even aware of. I was completely unconscious. And I started to cry for 30 minutes, and there was all of this sadness and guilt that showed up pretty deeply in my body around his death, that I thought that I had healed, because we're like, yeah, that's done, that's gone. It's not.
It's 3 years ago.
Yeah, well, grief surfaces when we want it to look at it. But yes, I just kind of revisited both the importance of him being in my life, and my first book is dedicated to him. And in the beginning, it says, it's like, what's our soul contract with people? And Daniel, from the moment he saw me, loved me with a love that I denied myself my whole life. And he saw me with the unconditional love I didn't know how to receive yet. And so when I really sat with that the last couple of weeks, it was like, oh, it's time to really receive that. It's time to really take what our soul contract was about. I don't think I've integrated it in the last 3 years, really take it in and receive that love. So that was kind of our soul contract and agreement. And one of the things he said to me one of his, our last day together was, it's been such a gift to love you in this life. And I think about how important it is that we love ourselves in this life. And I wish that all people could have that space, and it takes time to learn to give it to ourselves. But that's the work that I'm doing at present is, I'm worthy, but am I really receiving the love that I am from myself and from this world?
And that's a hard place to get to for anyone. I know we were talking earlier before we started filming about our past, our loves in our life that we've had, and the things that have gone on for us. And with both of us, I think there's a very strong sense of self. But I know for me personally, it's been a journey to get there and understand who I am. And in doing that, there's parts of me that I've had to change and let go of because they're not serving me. And then there are other parts where that is just sort of who I am, and I'm happy to live with that. But I think for you to get to that point of understanding of self and be ready to receive that love, was it a big journey, or has it been sort of small things along the way, or has it been major sort of events that have gotten you there?
Oh God, I think that learning to like fully love and accept, because every day we're getting new pieces of ourselves that we need to expand, to open up and love. It's like, whoa, that's a new piece of me I need to love. So I just turned 30, and I think I've really been dedicated. I grew up with a mom that was really open-minded and into shamanism. So I've always had kind of the environment and a lot of the tools, which I'm grateful for growing up. But when I was around 21, I started to really dive into personal development, and I met parts of myself that were so scary. I remember doing one activity in a personal development program in Edmonton and in Alberta in Canada. It was like minus 25 degrees Celsius outside, and I was so terrified to see this limiting belief inside of myself. I left the exercise, I walked outside in my socks, and I just like was walking in the snow, and I was like, I don't know if I'm ever coming back because that's fucking scary. So that was the first time I started to like touch the wound piece. And I really feel like about 4 days ago, I took out some of like the deep parts of me that I didn't want to look at. And I really, it's interesting because I'm still processing everything that happened with Prem, the healer I was working with, but I really do feel like there's nothing left inside of me that I'm aware of today that needs to be looked at and loved. And I've been navigating the world the last couple of days with a really beautiful lightness, which is really nice. But yeah, I think it's a lifelong journey because, as I said, everything that came up the last 2 weeks with Daniel and the grief, and another friend, Mindy, that I lost, was it was in my body. You know, and that's the thing right now with personal development is psychology and counseling is great, but I think that the way back to healing ourselves is through the somatic body. And so, you know, my healing I didn't even know it was there. It was just inside. So yeah, I would say so far I'm doing pretty good at loving myself, but who knows what's tomorrow.
Well, I mean, with the writing, I've always believed that the first part of moving forward and development and growing as a human is understanding who we are, but being honest about it. Do you know what I mean? It's just, rather than saying, this is who I am, and it's nothing like the person that you are or the life that you're living, to be able to hold a mirror up for better or worse and say, this is it. I think my belief, rightly or wrongly, is that once we can do that, then we can start moving forward. And I've always found in your writing, there is a very strong sense of self, a very big understanding of who you are. And not only do you understand it, you just write about it and put it out there for the world to see. And in a world where everyone has an opinion and everybody is not afraid to share it.
Yeah.
Which I think can be quite difficult.
Totally. Yeah.
So you actually spent time in Australia, and you mentioned that before, but you did a big journey through the outback.
Yeah, I did a 30,000 kilometer journey. I went from the East Coast, I went down to Melbourne and then all the way up and drove from was it like kind of Ganthum? I went to Broome and Perth, but I also went up north. It was so hot. It was, what was that place called?
So Darwin?
Darwin, yeah. And I was 19, and that's when I first realized I wanted to be a writer. That's where I started to write. And I've been living a pretty superficial life up until then. And there's like some 6-level bar in Sydney that's really famous. I don't know, there's probably a lot of them.
Not the Ivy?
Yes.
Okay.
So I was in the Ivy, and I remember I had like my hair done and a ton of makeup. I was wearing this like lace dress and these high heels. And I was talking to somebody drinking a glass of champagne, and all of the bubbles went flat in my glass. And I looked around, and there was no sincerity to the existence of anybody there. And I felt really special to be in this like cool club, you know, Paris Hilton was there, and, you know, whatever, all the things. And then I just realized what that life lacked. And I went to go live in my car and, you know, make chai on a petrogas burner somewhere by a highway, and really touch the spirit of being connected to nature and to land, and had the courage to start accessing the art inside of me. And that's kind of when it all started to show up for me.
So when you did Darwin in Central Australia,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even Broome, and that is my favourite part of the
So
country.
beautiful, yeah.
Oh, I try and explain to people, and then I think, stop telling them, because I don't want it to become overrun with tourists.
Yeah.
But so did you do much, or did you learn much from the Aboriginal culture?
Yeah, I was shocked with the racism. I had a car mechanic when I started to do my drive who was like, oh, if you see any Aboriginals, just run them over. And I remember...
He said that?
Yeah, and I remember just being like, what? And I went to Uluru, or Ayers Rock, and I remember reading and learning so much knowledge. They had a center there, and being so hurt. People walk, I'm sure you know, they walk Ayers Rock, which is, it's sacred
They're
ground.
about to shut it down, and because of that, just deviating for a second, double the amount of people that were climbing it before are now rushing to climb it before they close it. I find it so offensive.
Yeah,
but that's a
totally.
whole separate thing. But yes.
Yeah, one of my mentors, Deanne Whalen, has amazing films and books, but she's currently walking the Trans-Canada Trail, which is a 24,000 kilometer journey through Canada. And one of the things she's doing is walking for lost wisdom. And she says that so many people on our earth right now are walking on the planet and not with her. And that's the biggest thing that I see with Uluru is like, there's so much ancient wisdom and knowledge and richness to learn from any First Nations culture, the first people that live somewhere, from the rocks. In her film, she talks about how, rocks are like grandfathers and grandmothers, and like having that respect and presence for this land. And we've really lost that in our world. So
I agree.
I'm glad they're closing that, though. That's a gift.
Yeah. And I just, from what I know of you and what I know of the Aboriginal culture that I learned growing up, because I'm obviously from there, Melbourne, not up north, but you learn about their rituals and all of that. And I just imagine that you and that would have gone quite well together, especially if you were on this soul.
Totally. I was in the most
mission.
Spiritual part of my path there. I was like attracting like psychics and mediums. So I was very, very much, in the spirit space and really enjoying the spirit of the land and all of that. So
how long was that journey for?
It was about a year.
Oh my God, that's incredible. You've probably seen more of the country than what I have.
I know, but I'm guilty of not seeing that of Canada. So that's what we are.
Yeah, I think when we travel great distances, we find it a little bit easier to just focus and be present. One of the things that was brought up, because we are running out of time, but I did want to touch on this. You talked about women having plastic surgery and things like that done to themselves. And I'm the first to admit I've had my nose done. First time for vanity, second time I had to fix what the first guy did, and I feel like that was the universe punishing me for what I did. But I've been accused of having a lot more done, which I haven't, but I read what you had written about it, and then I read about the reaction that people had to that. And you were essentially attacked for having those beliefs. And then in the article that I read, there was you explaining what you had meant. So I just wanted to touch on that, because when I mentioned I was speaking with you, one of my friends said, she said all this stuff about women having anything done to their faces. And when I read what you wrote, it wasn't about women wanting to do these things for themselves. It was about women doing these things to themselves for somebody else, or taking it to such extremes because they're so unhappy within themselves, and instead of looking within and sort of dealing with the internal and how they're feeling about themselves, they go and they almost turn themselves into caricatures of who they were. Am I understanding that correctly, or do I have it all wrong?
No, it's beautiful. And the conversation I wanted to have is, are we doing the work to really love and accept ourselves on a physical body, emotional body, all of the different levels? Or are we just going to buy a body that looks like what we think is going to get us love? And we're brainwashed from the moment that we're 3 with Cinderella getting a makeover and getting the prince. Like, we get these unconscious conditioning. And unfortunately, our generation is blessed with being able to have some tools and skills to do the work, but we're not taught emotional intelligence or how to love ourselves in school. And that's gonna be the biggest crime in our education system, is we're not actually given that as a tool to use through our life. And it's that difference between, am I buying a nose because I think it's going to get me love? And, you know, or am I even aware of that choice? And that was the conversation I wanted to have, is like, we are worthy of love from the moment that we are born. And we are given bodies that look a certain way, and it's triggering to have me to talk about this because I'm a size 0 and I'm blonde and I'm what society might term as beautiful. So people say, how dare you be a spokesperson because you wouldn't understand? But it's like, we need to talk about it. And if anything, it's like, I want women to think about, yeah, why am I doing this? Is it because I don't feel worthy of love? And if so, a nose job's never going to get us love.
No.
You know, it's like looking inside of our souls, and more so that work, because that's like the root work that actually gets us what we're trying to buy, even when we go shopping or buy a new outfit, all the external stuff. So yeah, that was greatly, I am sometimes fire when I communicate, so I don't know if it was the most graceful, but I was in El Salvador and saw a woman who had so much plastic surgery, she didn't even look like anything to me. She just looked like, she was lost to me in her physical appearance, and I was so sad because it was like, God, we're given meat bags that are unique to us, and I was like slammed on the Today Show and all over. It was Australian media actually.
Well, and it was an Australian girl that brought it up to me, and I said, I haven't seen this, and so I actually went looking for it, and that was when I read the post, read the media reaction and the online reaction, and then your response to it, and I thought, there is something much deeper here, and that was why I wanted to just touch on it. And as someone who has had something done, I've had people judge me for it. I've also been accused of having my boobs done and my cheeks done and so much other stuff, all of which is untrue. But I mean, it's such a funny topic, and I'm not offended because I'll own what I've done, and I can also explain.
Yeah, and I don't want shame around it. That's the thing too, is like, I don't like the people shame, like, it's interesting because it's like, that isn't the conversation I want to have. Shaming people and judging people for how they live their lives, which is, I think, what people misunderstood the most, is like, I just want to say, are we doing the work to love ourselves? And I think that a lot of like the beauty industry and Hollywood and everything just like forces down what beautiful looks like down our throats. And it's like, are we aware of what truly makes us worthy of love, which is nothing, you know, which is just being born and opening our eyes and our mouth and just existing as these little babies before we're taught anything. And so it's, yes, and I totally, I've never, it isn't about shaming, and my communication might not have been graceful with it, but it was more so like, yes, like, do we love ourselves? I was surfing with a guy in El Salvador. I know we're at time. Are we at time? We're good?
We're almost out of time to finish the story, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, so it was going on while I was there, and I was really hurt, like, to make international television and to say I was slamming women for me, which is I want to empower women, was like, shit, that's not what I wanted. And so I was talking to him about it, and he was like, you know, Yana, there was this TV host of a show, and she had like this big, beautiful nose. Like, I loved her nose. It was so beautiful. It was huge. It's like, she was gorgeous. And then one day, she comes on the television.
Cute little button
tiny nose. And she was like, that's what I loved about her. And so I just thought about that, of like, you know, it's just like rewiring what we think is beautiful to be not even our physical bodies, but just to accept, and it's part of it, but yeah.
Well, Jennifer Grey, who did Dirty Dancing, she always hated her nose, but the day she changed it, the acting work dried up, and she was never able to sort of get to that level of success that she had with Dirty Dancing, and it was because her nose was part of what made her so beautiful and who she was, rather than looking the same. Last question, just before we touch briefly on your books, and then we're going to have to wrap it up. But when you hit a nerve like that, even though sometimes the feedback can be a little bit brutal, do you sit back and think, well, I've hit a nerve, so bringing this topic up has been the right thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Charles Bukowski, who I love, said, you know, good art is never neutral. It's meant to make you feel something.
Yes.
And people react strongly because in our world, our belief system is what keeps us safe. So like, our individual truths keep us safe. And if I say something bold and outrageous and strong that is my truth and my reality, which is all I ever want to be accountable for, I don't want to be accountable to be the truth of the world, is that challenges and can contradict the truths of other people. And to continue to feel safe, sometimes they need to, or think they need to, attack my truth to confirm that their truth is the real truth and they're safe.
Yes.
And so, if anything, I've learned that like any kind of emotion, whether it's deep resonance and love, is beautiful, as well as anger. And I love it. So many women will write me and say, I was so fucking triggered by you. And then I really thought about it and came back, and I really understand that that was about this in my life. And so, yeah, I'm here. Sometimes I trigger. I also get called the shame exorcist. And I'm good with all of those.
Well, I think if you're triggering people and making them think, I think that's always a wonderful thing. So your poems are available in, this is for the women who don't give a fuck.
Yes.
Which is an amazing book. You've got a couple more on their way.
Yes.
So excited for that. We will have your Instagram handle on the screen. But do you have a website people can find you at?
Yeah, YanaRobinson.com, spelt like Jane.
With 2 N's.
With 2 N's, yeah, that's right.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining me. I feel like we could talk for another hour.
Yes, thank you for having me, Natalie.
That is this episode of Sadie Says. Until next time, I'm Natalie Sady.